Need a search engine optimization SEO services? Then get in touch with our professional and friendly team to learn more about our range of custom and tailored services designed to suit your exact needs. Every one of our professionals have acquired years of experience, which ensures you get the very best. Our experienced staff is waiting to hear from you and to answer any specific questions that you may have on how we can meet your needs. Just ask for a consultation and let us prove our commitment to you as we promise to maintain the highest level of quality and commitment. Your satisfaction is our prime concern. So please, don't hesitate to get in contact with us and let us show you all the great options we have.
And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network here at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course the mothership at coalitionradio.us, where links can be found to our Civil Liberties podcast and Civil Liberties Guide and blog, where we feature organizations like the American Civil Liberties Union, talking about how they fight, they advocate on behalf of your civil liberties. Links to our YouTube page, links to our Spotify page, every place that you can find the Coalition. We've got a very special evening tonight. I would like to welcome back folks that I as often refer to with love as repeat offenders. And of course, I'm talking about Dr. Luis Daniel Munoz. He, of course, as an activist, a former candidate for the governorship of the great state of Rhode Island. He has been integral to the conversation surrounding supply chain management, as well as the efficacy of state and local government in the response to the COVID-19 corona crisis, but with a particular emphasis on communities that have been effectively marginalized by the, in my humble opinion, the poor and inadequate response of the government of the state of Rhode Island. Full disclosure, I'm a free market guy. But governments like the state of Rhode Island have forced free market solutions off the table. Again, in my opinion, as a result, they've broken it, they own it. And there are a number of people who are ill, whose lives are at stake right now. As different states contemplate reopening, we are left with what I call an obscenity here in Rhode Island, and that the fact that so many folks of lesser means find themselves still threatened by COVID-19. Also joining us, of course, is perhaps one of the most ubiquitous bloggers here in the state of Rhode Island, Bill Bartholomew. He of the Bartholomew Town podcast, and he has joined us a number of times. He's going to also offer his content, his approach, his reflections on the crisis from his firsthand sort of street and worn shoe leather reporting that's taken him literally all over the state. We've got a very special guest here. Joining us for the first time is Representative Anastasia Williams, she of District 9 of the great city of Providence, the Renaissance City. As we like to say, the city of 1,000 stories, joining us live, giving us her perspectives as someone who has started out as an activist, a social justice activist in Providence, and now has assumed and risen to high levels of power within Rhode Island via her career in the General Assembly. What her perspective is, both by living in the community and also as someone who has been a remarkable change agent in the state of Rhode Island for a number of years. First of all, I have to make special note, Representative Williams, thank you so much for joining us tonight. You honor us by being here, and we look forward to you, to your contribution to the conversation, because it is a difficult one. Bill, set the stage for us. We're now, it's a blur. I can't even tell you how many weeks we are into this. Years ago, the show Nightline, which was on ABC for a number of years, started as a result of the Iranian hostage crisis in the 70s. And they used to mark each day until eventually they just gave up because no one had any sense anymore of where we are. What's happening in Providence and Pawtucket and Central Falls and West Warwick to marginalized communities who still face a remarkable threat while other parts of the state talk about reopening the economy? I think we may have lost
Bill, I think you're muted. I'm unmuted on my
Bill
own.
might be
so
on
that
mute.
you-
Oh, now we got you.
Okay,
We
yeah, I
got
can
you.
hear you, Bill. Loud and clear now.
Beautiful. All right. Rarely you get two stabs at something on live radio here, so I'll take it. No, I think the truth is that it's better to evaluate what's happening in Newport, what's happening in Watch Hill. If you look this past weekend, you see there was a lot of activity, a lot of people who were just out and about as if it was a normal weekend. And the complaints that are coming from concerned citizens in those areas, that's one facet of the problem. But the bigger issue is the disconnect between the reality of what's going on the ground here in Providence or frankly throughout the urban core. It's just a totally different dynamic. And that disconnect hasn't been married in a way that you have the full state support. So you see the events that are canceled today, whether it's the Newport Folk Festival or the Washington County Fair, and you now have people who are talking about renegade operations so that they can, sort of go on with their summer as planned. Meanwhile, here in Elmwood, we still don't have a walk-up testing site. We still don't have translation services available for a vast portion of the population. So it's all about this disconnect here in this tiny little city-sized state that we have.
Representative Williams, I'm just going to give you an open mic, if you will. I'd love for you to just give voice to the concerns of the community that you represent. Tell us a bit about your district, from the geography, the economics, the people. Just give us a real vision into what's happening in District 9.
Well, my district, first of all, I'm very happy and honored to be here and on the coalition talk radio with all of you, Bill, Pat, Dr. Luis. So it's an honor to be able to have an opportunity, an outlet for my voice to further be heard elsewhere. It's certainly, my district is very diverse. It's very transit. The economic status ranges from super high to extremely low. And of course, those super highs have have not as much worries or concerns as the in between and the lower population of my district. And that's where I find myself working the hardest to represent the need, because I'm telling you, it's unbelievable how it's so easily being dismissed. The needs of the communities, not only in my district, but in my city and in Pawtucket, in Central Falls, and beyond. It's really disappointing how the administration has overlooked it. And I would say in some parts conveniently overlooked the needs of those populations, as if they don't exist.
What's particularly appalling to me, Representative Williams, is that when we look to New York City, and you look at where the hotspots in New York City, they identically mirror the standard of living and the impact on similar communities in Providence. Providence really is nothing more than a smaller version of a New York City or a Boston. And yet we refuse to learn from the lessons and the demonstrated needs of folks in that community. And then we're shocked when the people continue to suffer, people continue to die, and people continue to be not ill-positioned to save themselves, if you will. You've got compressed living conditions. Some of that's cultural. You've got communities where folks, multi-generational families will live together. You've got already challenges to a healthcare system that is not equal across this state. We can, in a separate show, we can argue why, but it simply isn't. And then, as I always reflect, in a state like Rhode Island, where there are so many disparities, it's awfully expensive to be poor, isn't it, Representative Williams?
It's extremely expensive to be poor in the city of Providence, and it's unfortunate because it's the number of individuals that are faced with that problem is increasing and still overlooked. If it had not been for the COVID-19 pandemic, the covers would not have been removed. The bright lights, the floodlights would not have been placed on the issues. Now, they all are aware of the issues that our urban communities are faced and have been facing. But because the advocacy groups, while they are strong and there are many, they are not looked upon as an entity or a group of people that know what they're talking about, what's best for the community for which they live and serve in. They are not a priority. So it's
Hey,
disheartening, it's
can I
disingenuous the way that this administration has handled this pandemic. It is very, if it's not about them coming up with what they believe to be the solutions or the plans, it's not important, it's not valid, it's not listened to, it's overlooked, and it's unfortunate because you cannot come to my house and tell me what works best in here, and you're just stepping in it for the first time. So it's better for you to come to my house and ask me, hey, how is everything working in here? Are you okay with everything? And then I can share with you what does and does not work and what I'm open to see if it would fit in my space. So they're not even interested
well,
in any of that.
Daniel, what
I'd love
you had a question?
to kind of well, yeah. Well, I have a question, but I'd like to lead up to the question just to share. There's a group of organizations, community leaders as well, that have come together and as a collective have raised awareness through a petition on health equity, which I mentioned in our last interview, that focuses on this need for testing expansion, further transparency, transportation measures to ensure that an urban core community that's dependent on public transportation can be safe against the spread of this disease and future resurgences, as well as translation and interpretation services, which Bill had also mentioned. And Representative Williams has been talking about this as well, and really, calling out for action. And I just want to kind of bridge this over to what Representative Williams just said. Representative Williams, as most of us know at this point, you released a letter that really summarized many of these issues, these economic and health and disparities, and even provided some data behind that. But really, all of that was to drive home this call to action that there should be grassroots community leaders, people from the community, that are being brought into these task forces and committees that are ultimately going to decide where resources are allocated at this moment in this crisis that is COVID-19. And I'm just wondering, as you attempt to bridge the kind of divide between what community organizations and leaders are doing today, and to bring their voice into these task forces and committees, what kind of hurdle barriers are you confronted with today?
Well, first and foremost, my biggest concern is that our community, the urban community, the community of color, the poor community, have been left out, overlooked. And we're talking about over $1 billion spent. I mean, I know what I could do with $1 billion with the communities that are in need. I would sit down and certainly divide that and put it in the places that it needs to go to first and foremost. But now that I have been appointed to the coalition, I mean to the financial oversight task force, I'm going in there with an objective, open mind to see where that money has gone. And then with the rest of the money that's coming in, have a voice on where it needs to go. Because seeing that those that were in charge of dispersing the monies, where they saw and believe and wanted to send it, they're going to have to now take off their blinders so that they will see the direction that the resources need to go to. Now, I was informed today that Congressman Senator Whitehouse had put out some information with regards to another $484 billion had been passed, was approved today down in Washington. And that is supposed to be going towards small businesses, support hospitals, and expand testing and tracking. You know, our testing and tracking here in the city of Providence, in the state of Rhode Island, for me, has been unacceptable. In our community, it's beyond that. But yes, we have had results because according to the numbers, you know, there's over 9,000 that have been tested. And I really question those numbers. I question those because I know personally of several individuals that have gone and gotten retested numerous times already. So those numbers are being counted in them. And it eliminates the individuals who don't have access to be able to go out there and get tested. So, and the tracking is another point that could be better than what they're doing.
I mean,
Dr.
what's the pulse of the community? Yeah, I was wondering
what
what's
they're
the
saying.
pulse of the community. I mean, yeah, like what are community members saying?
Go ahead,
Okay,
Luis.
the community remember, I'm dealing with the Southeast Asian community. I'm dealing with the African community. I'm dealing with the African American community. I'm dealing with the Latino community. I'm dealing with the community with disabilities, the homeless community. I have heard from these factors, and they're saying, you know, what can we do? What can you do for us? How can you help us? And I'm directing them to all the numbers and places that I am being told they need to go to, and to no avail, no services. So they want to be able to be taken care of. They want to get tested. You know, they're faced with, okay, if I go to a particular site to get tested, I have to come with a referral. I have to have an appointment. I agree. I'm wholeheartedly set up an appointment because of the distancing and all that. But if you have no type of insurance, any kind of medical insurance, you don't have a doctor, you are not affiliated with the health centers, you just don't have it. That means, how is it that you're going to go get tested if you need a referral? What is the purpose for setting up these portable testing sites and you can't utilize them? So, you know, so the frustration is coming back to me, and I am becoming like frustrated with the administration because you have these supposedly super intelligent 6 and 7 figure individuals in there with these master plans, and they're not fitting our communities. The Southeast Asian community, I mean, I wish I could go and just create the solution and bring it to them. No one is extending any type of services to them. So everybody is coming. And my thing is, when there's a complaint being brought to me, I feel it and I live it. I'm in it. It's visual. It's real for me. But my hands are tied because the administration is not hearing the suggestion that I'm bringing. They're seeing it's me, and that's all they see. And therefore, then they decide, well, it's her. Don't pay her no mind. I get blocked off of the governor's websites. You know, it's like, wait, this isn't about me. I can handle myself. I can do for me. This is about the constituency. This is about the community that's being overlooked, that's marginalized, that's silenced, and also afraid, that needs the attention and that you are not given. But certainly that money went somewhere, and I am anxious to see where it all went.
Representative Williams.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. There's 4 of us here, so there's a little bit of a lag, and you know, I look forward to a time when we can have you safely here in the studio and you know, actually make eye contact. I think a lot of us are looking forward to that. But there's another community that you haven't spoken of, and that I'm very concerned about, and that are the folks who are undocumented. Now, by definition, the insanity of excluding you, the elected leader of a community, whose sole purpose really is to act as the point person, the contact person, 2 ways, when you need something and when they need you. The insanity here is, let's take just doing the right thing for a moment. Forget about everything else. You've got a community that's diverse, challenged economically, and based on the style of living that happens in so many cities in New England, in older housing stock, are living in close confines. So it makes perfect sense to utilize the existing structure, not create all these new committees. We have a committee. It's called the General Legislature. And you have got profound contacts within that community as a longtime serving public servant. You know people intimately. You know personal issues. You are there to fill exactly this role. Now, the other side of it is the equally practical side, which is to say that your community, one of the hard, again, we haven't met. I spent nearly 3 years driving rideshare as a second job to put my kids through school, and I spent a great deal of time in the West and South End. And your community and the folks in your community represent a significant part of the employee base of healthcare around Rhode Island, both at Rhode Island Hospital, the affiliated hospitals, whether it be in professional staff, support staff. Many folks in your community work in the nursing home area. They provide home health care. They are integrated into the fabric of Rhode Island, and they do some of the most difficult and most challenging work in Rhode Island. We should be celebrating them both for the hard work and the bravery that they're exhibiting by continuing to going to work. And on a practical level, we need to keep them safe because they're immersed, they're surrounded by people who are ill, and they are simply going to bring that back to their community. So
Exactly.
quite frankly, your neighborhood, your district should have been one of the first 2 or 3 communities where you had this immersion, this overwhelming support medically to save lives and to also to hold together our healthcare system. I can't tell you how many nights, Representative Williams, where late at night I would pick up folks who were CNAs, nurses, security forces, and all sorts of jobs, and bring them from one part of the South End or the West End to Cranston or to Warwick. Now, forget for a moment the fact that mass transportation has failed people in your community so profoundly that they have to spend expensive money effectively working for an hour or 2 a day to simply get back and forth to work. Forget that for just a moment. That's a subject you and I need to talk about in the future, all right? But ultimately, they are so important to us on so many different levels. They're exhausted, they're underpaid, and yet at the same time, it would appear that the entire healthcare system in this state relies upon them. So how dare we not look to their needs as a community? They're heroes. This is nuts.
Yeah, and I have to interject and also say that it was just an oversight with regards to the undocumented community, because again, when I started out asking for support from the governor with regards to the different community of color throughout the state, and I was getting ignored, especially those frontline workers, those workers that's working in the hospitals and the nursing homes with regards to coverage. You know, I kept going back and forth to the governor with regards to having them properly insured in the event that they fell with the virus, that it would be work related. And of course it kept falling on deaf ear. So what I did was I contacted legal counsel and I said, draft me an executive order, because maybe the reason why she's not responding to my request is because, you know, they're extremely busy. So I had legal counsel go ahead and draft me an executive order, and I sent it over to her, because me requesting it as an elected official, as a colleague in government, a suggestion to secure, you know, to protect our frontline workers in the event that they had gotten infected was important, was a priority. They're at the forefront doing the work. It fell on deaf ear. I sent that over, and I sent it to the media. As soon as I sent it to the media, then all of a sudden, it's a great idea. Beacon comes on board, which I was confident that Beacon would come on board. I applaud Beacon for coming on board and saying, absolutely, we can do this. why did it take for me to have to go to the media before the governor and her team would say, you know what, there may be something here. Let's call her, or let's do it. Let's investigate it. I had to go to the media. I had to go to the public. I had to get Shanae all involved in this before she really did something. But the point here is something was done. What the sad part about this is the manner, the route that I had to go in order for it to get started. So, you know, it appears as though next step, the step of action, excuse me, Dr. Munoz?
Well, I was wondering, in terms of things that have gotten done, you know, I just wanted to get your reaction to one of the new testing sites in the elementary school. When you think about long-term sustainable infrastructure, you know, to address this public health crisis, which could easily go on for 12 months to 24 months, is an elementary school walking testing site enough?
Absolutely not. That was to pacify, because again, I sent out a list of about 6 to 8 sites that there could be portable testing done on a daily basis or alternate days, or however they wanted. And they came up with Robert Bailey Middle School. Okay, that's a start. However, you're saying to us, your community is the hardest hit. The numbers are the hardest. Why isn't it that you have not taken the initiative to add more sites, remove the barriers of needing to have a doctor's referral, and be able to have these people? Because there's a lot of undocumented individuals that don't have the resources, the means, the transportation to get there. And in addition, they're concerned about ICE being out there and coming and snatching them up. Right. And you have uniformed police officers standing at these sites. Now, why, if you find a need that you want to have security there, why can't they be plain clothes individuals, opposed to someone with a uniform that's going to deter someone that's concerned about their safety of being snatched up? Because realistically, a lot of our community, documented or undocumented, don't trust a lot of us being elected, being community leaders, being activists on our behalf. We still have reservations, and these are some of the reasons why. You're talking the talk, but you're not walking the walk.
The notion that, and we, earlier this week, we had the ACLU on, and they were discussing the success they'd had recently at the Wyatt Detention Center, where folks who were suffering with deportation issues had gotten caught up at Wyatt and literally were on lockdown for what was essentially a civil penalty. And it took weeks of effort by a legal team to get 2 late middle-aged, almost elderly gentlemen to be released on an ankle bracelet from a facility that was dropped into Central Falls and essentially preys on the people of the South End, the West End, Central Falls, Arctic, all the neighborhoods in Rhode Island, where ICE continues, despite an international epidemic, to see the primary role of government not in trying to interdict this crisis, not to make lives better, not to save lives, but to simply take advantage of the sudden, if you will, exposure because of basic functional health needs of folks who are here in this country on an undocumented basis. And I just want to point out, before my conservative friends scream and protest, that their grandparents came to the United States through Ellis Island and did not have to go through nearly any of the hoops that they had, and yet had better exposure probably to public health than some of the folks in South Providence do in the year 2020. Now, am I using inflammatory rhetoric? Yes, I am. Is it the truth? Yes, it is. So it's time to stop the nonsense and going after folks who have to expose themselves for purposes of public, not just the safety of them and their family, but the safety of the families, the children, the elderly who live in close confines with them in the community. The overriding, I love your reaction to this statement. To me, the overriding concern of law enforcement in the state of Rhode Island right now should not be the interdiction of low-level, victimless, quote-unquote crimes which serve nothing less than a pipeline to prison. It should be ensuring the safety of everyone, regardless of their place of origin, regardless of their age, regardless of their economics, simply because as a community, we are all relying on each other to be healthy, because if we are not, then we will all die together. Am I out of bounds?
Honey, you're getting 3-pointers each shot. Keep it going, baby. Yes.
This is not rocket science.
And we have they consider themselves brainiacs. They're the experts. They're the best.
Oh.
But yet and still, they're missing every shot. But then I think about it. They're not really. It's almost it's orchestrated. They're not missing the shots. They're intentionally taking care of their own business first.
Right.
First, because when and agendas are important, right? And we have to consider the agendas here. And Bill, you were going to say something as well.
Well, I was just going to say, I was tested, I guess now about 2 weeks ago, and I did have an appointment and went into CCRI through the parking lot. And what was interesting about it was, for me, white kid, grew up in South County, you can search me, whatever you want to do. But nonetheless, I approached the site, and it's a National Guard checkpoint where, as I'm placing my license up against the window of my vehicle for my identification to be cleared to enter the premises, I noticed that my hand was shaking, that I was nervous. It was an intimidating environment, that had more of the vibe of, again, a checkpoint, hyper secure facility, where I'm thinking to myself, Jesus, am I leaving here and, at the end of this test, or is there more to this than I expected? So all I could think of immediately was, wow, I can't imagine how anybody who has any sort of skepticism of government, any sort of skepticism of police, military, so on and so forth, is going to feel comfortable going through. And Pat Ford, you'd be right there. But I mean, if you have something to lose, what I mean, based just on your own experience in life thus far, you arrive at that checkpoint and you see the giant traffic sign blinking, with a bunch of rules and instructions, and men in fatigues with their face covered with baklavas and so on and so forth. And in some cases, weapons available to the military police. It's an intimidating environment. I understand that the National Guard has to manage the facility, but, that's something interesting that Rep. Williams brought up there, is that, you have a situation where it's by, just those intangibles are not geared towards this most vulnerable and now susceptible population.
I mean, let me add to that as well. So that sorry, Pat, but that's one layer of it. But let's take a step back and even consider, not having English as a first language. You're calling a physician. You don't have a PCP, so you're calling an urgent care center, or you're calling a hotline, and you're trying to prove a case to them as if you were in front of a judicial body, right? You're trying to prove that your symptoms are severe enough to warrant a test referral. And, in some cases, there have been reports of that where people have mild symptoms, but it doesn't matter how much they're really trying to explain their discomfort. They're somewhat not meeting a criteria that is being followed by a doctor on the other side of the phone call. And, that in of itself is a different type of intimidation, but it's intimidation just as much. And so, they're just like these barriers to our most vulnerable populations getting in front of a test. Imagine the barriers to someone who is confirmed, but is told to go home and wait it out and not go to the hospital, right? Imagine that, and that's happening.
And waiting out can literally kill them. It's and on top of that, now we've got folks in the community. It's difficult enough with this situation, but I believe that same level of intimidation and fear comes to folks self-hospitalizing or going to an emergency room. Again, to your point, Luis, because there's a complete absence of significant community care in the community, within a lot of the neighborhoods in Providence, as well as other cities in the urban core. And so when it comes to even now regular reasons to visit, whether it be heart attack, mild stroke, a number, doctors are reporting across the country in urban areas that folks are being intimidated away, if you will, from medical care, which again will prove on the most important level potentially deadly, on the second level incredibly costly. We lose at every single level because of this overarching need to demonstrate power by the state, whether it's at the border of our state to interdict desperate New Yorkers who are simply going to their homes, or someone with an out-of-state plate, or whether it be the folks, the residents of Rhode Island who are looking for help. And I'm baffled by it. It's to me, there is a clear, if the difference between Blackstone Boulevard and Broad Street has never been broader. It's just never been more defined. There exists a sort of Berlin Wall in this city of medical care, educational opportunities, employment opportunities. You are now defined by your zip code, fully and completely, as opposed to whether or not you're simply a resident of the city of Providence or a resident of the state of Rhode Island. It's despicable.
But they're quick to fix their lips and say that it doesn't matter what zip code you come from, because we're going to treat you right with dignity. But it's not so. That Berlin Wall is not only over there on Blackstone Boulevard, because they carry it. They have a portable wall that they come and they put it in any communities that they so choose.
Absolutely.
So it's all around.
That's a powerful analogy. That's a powerful analogy.
But it's true.
I mean,
it's really true.
Yeah,
because what I find it now is what I personally, I'm Afro-Tina, okay? And what I watched the governor's community forum yesterday with the Latino community, and I was appalled at one particular, a few responses, but I was particularly concerned about one. Dr. Rodriguez asked a question with regards to getting the number of kids that have been tested thus far. And the response that was given was that due to HIPAA law, they cannot give that. Now, what was disheartening and disappointing with that? What was disheartening and disappointing with that is that he didn't follow up. And it was, if no one knew the real answer to that, they're going to leave with that. If that's the case, why is not the numbers that they're giving us on a daily basis not restricted by HIPAA? All he asked was the number of children. He didn't ask names, addresses, nothing. And that was the answer. So they're always very creative with creating illusion and putting disbursements out there for the people to believe that what they're saying, because they're the expert, it's true. Don't believe the hype, honey. I'm not one that's buying into their numbers or their answers.
Well, I do want to clarify that too, or I want to add to it, not clarify, but add to it. The response that was given was not by a medical professional. It was the education commissioner that confirmed that Dr. Alexander Scott should have been there answering that question and any healthcare related questions. I just want to say that first of all. Second, what I would add to your point, Rep. Williams, is unless it's confidential or patient information, right? So unless it's patient information or confidential information, patient information will be related to, of course, medical history, certain identifying, date of birth, possibly, right? Confidential information might be addresses, but you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, why can we not know how many children statewide have been infected with COVID-19? And, I don't know if you were getting at this, Rep. Williams, but in my mind, when I see these filtered press conferences, these filtered forums online after 6 weeks of not doing anything, it makes me wonder whether the questions being posed and then batted at are really just, pretty much just set up for the administration to provide, as you're saying, misinformation, misinformation.
Is that a question, a concern that you have? Because the answer is real easy. That was very well orchestrated, not very well orchestrated. It was orchestrated. There's no question about, it was set up, because some of the questions were, I need some assistance to get my unemployment, to file unemployment. So they were general questions. It needed to be answers to the pandemic of where you need to go. I need for you to go get tested. I need for you to be tracked. They need to tell you that we're tracking the steps of from these individuals that are getting tested. It was not that. It was a show. And the part of having a show is to entertain. And what we need to be doing is educating and treating and moving to the next step. That's not happening. That is not happening. And the sad part about it is, what I find insulting is that they're utilizing, and they're utilizing individuals that have agreed to go on to, I want to articulate what I want to say correctly so that I don't offend anybody, because I'm not trying to offend anybody. But the individuals who, like the governor said, I'm relying on her task force to provide her with this information. I'm concerned that the task force are individuals that are beholden to her. They're not beholden, when they should be beholden to the community that is in need. Because of the fact, if they were beholden to the community that is in need, they would get more testing locations. They would have better tracking reports. They would know when I asked the question twice, if out of the 9,000 tests, did that 46% come out of that 9,000, or did the 46% came out of the 2,500 that when they started documenting who was taking and their nationalities and all that other information. Because prior to that number, at the beginning, that information was not being taken correctly. Was not even, and it's not mandatory. So where is that 46% really coming from?
I agree.
Where's the other? Huh?
Go ahead,
I'm
Dan.
sorry. There's a little bit of a delay, Rep. Yeah, there's a little bit of a delay, Rep. Williams. So sometimes I want to kind of say something to agree and augment, but then you hear it later. So that's my apologies. But
Okay.
I do want to, maybe Bill can point out some of the recent findings. A report by one of the mainstream media outlets that talked about a bit of data. There was a significant bit of data that was wrong, which categorized patients that had died as being discharged. And it was really, please, if you'd like to take off with it, Bill, it'd be great for everyone to hear that.
Yeah, last night WPRI Channel 12 published a story that exactly that if someone has passed away as an unfortunate death, as they're being categorized, right, that occurs inside a hospital, that person is then marked as discharged. So that's the type of question that is extremely important to a community to understand, to be able to wrap their head around what's going on. A similar question is, well, what happens to those who aren't necessarily passing away, but those who are going to the hospital and have severe injury? I've heard from some nurses in Rhode Island Hospital have said, hey, look, in fact, I was out at the protest to reopen Rhode Island on Saturday. And I know Dr. Munoz saw that I was out there. And I heard from some friends and medical professionals said, hey, man, you can't be there. You cannot put yourself at risk to be out in public like that, because there are 30-somethings coming into Rhode Island Hospital and having strokes. Okay, there are people who, they may not be dying, but their lives are changing as a result of this virus. They have no pre-existing conditions and so on and so forth, and a variety of demographic backgrounds. So the numbers that we're getting right now, they don't match up necessarily to the full story. And that also creates this dynamic where you have Watch Hill and Newport and in full beach summer mode here, while you have so much skepticism and confusion on the ground in the city. And, Dr. Munoz, I think you've been one of the people who have been out in front in just calling for transparency. I mean, this isn't conspiracy theory stuff. This is nothing of that sort. This is just basic, hey, guys, can we just be real? We can handle the truth. The community can handle the truth. Everyone is ready to grow up when it comes to this matter and face it. And, the fact that there isn't testing here in Elmwood right now, walk-up testing, for example, that either tells me that they are, in fact, so well aware that there isn't, there's absolutely no problem, that maybe we're all missing something and there's a big ruse being pulled off right now, but 99.9% likely what it is that they just haven't responded.
Yes.
Yeah, I said it earlier, Bill, and yeah, and the truth is that, the actual history of this crisis, and I did say this earlier, so I'm just rehashing, it's not going to be shaded, right, by the empty promises behind these political podiums, this grandstanding that we're seeing all the time. It's going to be etched into the scars of a generation of communities that have been ignored and left behind. And what you're pointing at, Bill, is that the trauma that our communities, will feel at this point, it's less just purely economic. It's less just purely poverty, right? At this point, there's real physical harm. There's real medical consequences. And what are our communities going to do in the future when they have to live with the consequences of the failures of our leaders today? And, maybe I'm just repeating myself here, but I just don't understand why there is not a greater urgency to make investments into sustainable infrastructure. Something that will last more than 6 months until schools open. We need walk-up clinics. We need, frankly, clinics that are brick and mortar that will withstand the test of time, because those that were standing in the past have already started to crumble and are barely able to supply the needs of our communities.
Here's my frustration. It's essentially there are two Rhode Islands. I listen to elected leaders wax poetic about restoring Rhode Island to a place where people can go to the beach and enjoy Federal Hill, a restaurant at Federal Hill, and they can go out and play tennis, and they can take a nice long drive down to Westerly. The reality is that in a perfect world, there's a significant part of Rhode Island that doesn't get to experience that on any day. Never mind when we're talking about. So there's this. Anytime I hear that, what's left on the hair on the back of my head goes straight up, because I'm sensing, just from my experience in Providence, is that there are a lot of people who aren't going to go down to the beach after this is done, and they're not going to grab a grilled pizza at one of our fine places on Federal Hill, in part because the government is so ham-handled that most of them will be out of business. They just, that's their way of sugarcoating the situation here, because they just point to better days, and when those better days come, everything will be fine. But the reality is, it wasn't fine to begin with, and if we don't do something drastic, it will never be fine for any of these communities. The term ghetto is a very charged word, and I'm old enough to remember ghettos when I grew up in New Jersey, Representative Williams, right outside of Newark, New Jersey, in the 60s and the early 70s. And but it also goes back to World War II, when folks of other ethnic communities were placed into ghettos. Now what we've got here in Rhode Island effectively is not just economic ghettos, where the schools don't get the type of physical support that schools in other communities do. We now are having a healthcare ghetto. We now have an illness ghetto, where, again, we have allowed brothers and sister Rhode Island of ours in communities to become second, third, and fourth class citizens with regard to the reaction to this crisis. And it's simply inhumane. Yet there doesn't seem to be a real sense of urgency, other than on a cosmetic basis, with regard to the governor's legacy and the governor's political prospects, to do a damn thing about it. Am I overreacting? You guys can tell me if you think I'm nuts. I believe this to my core, though.
No,
I think that
again, I
you're
mean,
not overreacting. I don't think you're overreacting. You, from my perspective, the governor is doing what benefits the governor and all of whom her surroundings that looking for higher aspirations, period. So that is first and foremost. Her actions has demonstrated that to me. Yes, she's twinkled a little bit here and there, as you can see. I call it window dressing, okay? But the real business, she has been focused. She has been definitely right on point to the plans and ideas that she and her entourage want to accomplish in this time frame right here. And it's clear
and
because
can I,
we would not be having this conversation. Go ahead.
Go
well,
ahead,
Go
I
Luis.
ahead.
just want to add in, yeah, a couple of things. And I know that Bill has a checkout time for 10 o'clock, so I want to respect that as well. But you know, I think this is a unique opportunity to lift up communities, is right, that haven't been lifted up. And the governor, while there's been steps in this administration of recent steps that, as you mentioned, Rep. Williams, that have attempted to kind of satisfy the needs of the public, but really those needs have not been satisfied. Our Cape Verdean community, has not been provided with resources of translation and interpretation services. There's still community leaders out there doing live videos all the time to translate the conferences on a daily basis. Our Haitian community, our Southeast Asian communities, right? And those communities are diverse, right? Laotians, Cambodians, right? Hmong. I mean, we have a ton of communities that have not been helped by this administration. And this administration has the technology, has the resources, has the funds. But as you mentioned, it just doesn't seem to have the will. And, I just want to, put that out there before Bill needs to go, because I think that all of us here are really standing in solidarity to say that, it's a problem and we need to do something about it.
Yeah, and I would call upon others who are seeing, listening to this conversation and to step forward, because while we are all in agreement of what is not being done, obviously they're listening to us, but they're not hearing a word we're saying unless we get funky enough to be that extra creative to have to go and do the unnecessary in order for them to jump and do something. And that's when they're going to throw a little bone here and there, and that's not sufficient. Divide and conquering is exactly what's happening with right now with the communities. I'll take care of this one and I'll leave the others, and they'll fend for themselves somehow, and that is not good.
What do you think, Representative Williams? What are the steps that we can do as ordinary Rhode Islanders, with maybe a little bit more of a pulpit, maybe a little an extra little reach than the average working Rhode Islander has? What would you like to see us do? Empower us to try and accomplish something on behalf, again, not of people who live in the hood, people who live in the city, our brothers and sisters here in Rhode Island. What can we do to help them?
I think we need to get the administration to see that these are your brothers and sisters as well. I need for the information, the accurate information, to get out there. I don't want all of this fluff and other stuff. I need for you to be able to be asking, requesting for information that's not being given out to even myself as an elected official. I need for you all to put the pressure on these people. I need for you all to strategically come out with a plan that's going to move them to do the right thing with all these communities that are so disenfranchised and marginalized and overlooked and dismissed. I need for you all to tell them, like she says, knock it off and do the right thing. Period. Period.
Right.
Because we are important too. We have families too. We have a dream too. We matter. If we chose not to go to work, it would be crumpled. this city, this state would be crumpled down to its knees. So, it's not about them waking up. It's about them standing up and seeing us and doing what's supposed to be done. Not in little trinkle here and there. We need 10 more testing sites. We need all of those things. They know, but it's not enough of us letting them know that they better do it. Their thing about returning to normal is not our normal.
Go ahead, Dr.
I want to thank you so much. I just want to thank you so much, Rep. Williams, and thank you, Bill. I know that Bill has another commitment, and it's been, I think this has been a truly empowering discussion. I truly appreciate the contributions that you've made, Bill, that Rep. Williams has made, and the opportunity that the Coalition Radio, Talk Radio, has given all of us really to speak truth to power here. And so I'm really saying this, Bill, because I want to certainly thank you and not make it awkward. So you're not going to banish into the darkness.
See you later. Boom. Yeah, exactly. We have special effects go off here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No,
so if you have any
well.
last words you want to say, Bill. Yeah.
Look, there's been a lot of talk about big media versus indie media, this, that, and the other, insiders versus outsiders. And at the end of the day, that all needs to be put aside immediately. If you work for a television station or if you have a small blog, whatever it is, if you're an elected official, if you're somebody who's an unelected community leader, this is a point where it doesn't really matter, who you answer to. There's a right and a wrong way to go about this at this point, and that moral compass needs to guide you. And if it doesn't, then, look at this. I'm someone who's agnostic at this point. I look at the you look at the sunrise and the sunset and you go, hard to imagine where, there's not a right and a wrong, and there's somewhere down the line where you're going to be answering to that. And this is one of those moments, where I think we all agree, no matter what your spiritual background is of any kind, even if you're an atheist, your moral compass should be guiding you. Not the bottom line of your advertisers or anything like that. And the questions that need to be asked right now are hyper specific. There should be about, hey, why don't we have a testing site at Mashpog Commons in West Elmwood, where there's a gigantic open parking lot, abandoned lot there. Hyper specific questions, not just general at this point. And look, I don't think Governor Raimondo is an evil person or anything of that nature either. I think she wants to do the right thing. I just don't know. Look, today I asked her, I said, what do you think about the Black Island Ferry? Are you going to be able to have more than 15 people on the ferry this summer? And if not, then what does that say about Black Island's tourism infrastructure? And she said, you know what? I haven't even thought about that yet, to be honest with you. And she's overwhelmed. And there's an element of this where you just need to become the priority. You just need to prioritize this vulnerable population. And no matter what you are, if you have a position where you have an opportunity to speak up, you got to use it. Otherwise, it's morally incorrect. And that's my take. And on that note, I am going to sign off because I do have another call that started at 10. And but Rep. Williams, very much appreciated and always been an admirer of your approach. And Pat Ford, there it is, the Coalition Talk Radio. Dr. Munoz, always a pleasure. And good night.
Good night, buddy.
Good night.
Yeah, if I can just put sort of a exclamation point on this. This is a moment in time when not only do we need to change the answer, we simply need to change the question. And if that sounds cliched, I apologize. But ultimately,
No, that sounds good.
it's in a defining moment like this, to Bill's comments, we can rise up and we can establish fundamental change. And for all of us on this conversation, that may mean different things, and it may mean different priorities. But ultimately, the end goal should be creating an environment here in Rhode Island where, as obvious as this sounds, opportunities at every level should be made available to everyone. And so when we create this great divide that already exists in terms of education and economics, and then we further define it by using the power of government to ultimately marginalize people because of their ability to obtain health care, then are we even a community anymore? Rip it down. Start from scratch. If there is such a culture of failure on so many different levels in how we decide who gets to have a fruitful, productive, enjoyable life and who doesn't, that I have to tell you, Representative Williams, I'm of the school of thought where I just say rip it the hell down and let's start from scratch, because I don't know. I wouldn't have thought this pre-COVID, because when I looked at the conditions of Providence schools and what's been allowed to happen there, when I saw that, I thought we had reached rock bottom. I really had. I didn't see any which way that we could discriminate against an entire community. And that community is incredibly diverse. There's no one set of racial, religious, ethnic, sexual group in any of them. They're a large mass of people. I don't know. I didn't think it was possible that we could sink any lower, and yet we have. It's astonishing the level we have. So let's just, at a certain point, if they can't respond to us quickly, let's just rip it the hell down and start from scratch, because I don't know what else we can do to people in that community and in the variety of communities around Rhode Island. Again, whether it be Central Falls, Arctic, whether it be Pawtucket, whether it be parts of Cumberland, whether it be Woonsocket. Woonsocket is in terrible condition. And this is despite the billions of dollars spent from federal sources, state and local taxes, local business people. We have a crushing tax burden, and yet an incredible inability to provide an environment where the poorest among us can achieve some level of dignity. Sorry, folks, I just say rip it the hell down. Time to start from scratch.
I agree with you to an extent. My fear with ripping it down is that we will be completely gone, disappeared. There'll be no coming back.
Yeah,
I would say it's by ripping it down, the whole analogy, we're assuming that there was anything that was built up. And
sure.
I would argue that nothing has ever been built. That what we have an opportunity today to do is to build a foundation, foundation that was never built, and I think any institution that we then build on that foundation in terms of rebuilding our education system when this is over, rebuilding our healthcare system as we go through this, I think it'll be stronger for it. But it has to start with a foundation. And like any foundation, you have to account for the risk in the stability of the ground, right? The thing that's going to hold you up. And as Rep. Williams mentioned, the people in our urban cores, the people in our rural environment, in our rural cities and towns as well, right? But ultimately today, when we're talking about healthcare, it's very clear that our urban core communities, our communities of color, are in need of a foundation in healthcare, so that they can outlast this. And I think that if we build that correctly, that will serve as a template for our other communities, for Woonsocket, for Burrville, right? I mean, whether it's urban or not, like if you have a strong foundation, then I think we will be able to expand. But right now, we're building we built our castles on sand, and COVID-19, was the quicksand.
Well, I look forward to a time in a few weeks, and that doesn't mean we can't continue to have these conversations on the air, but I look forward to a time there maybe the four of us and maybe a handful of other people can grab a cup of coffee or whatever. I'm a root beer guy myself, Representative Williams. With
2 scoops of vanilla ice cream,
yes, Yacht Club. So I will bring the Yacht Club soda root beer. Okay, the finest root beer on the planet, made right here in Centerdale, Rhode Island. Who, by the way, if folks, they're wonderful people, they're Rhode Islanders, and like everyone else, they face a series of struggles. So if you're in the mood for a root beer, please go to Centerdale and buy some Yacht Club. And by the way, Representative Williams, if you have folks in your community who have businesses that have managed to stay open, or trying to stay open and need a free pitch and a free conversation and a chance to promote themselves, please just send me the information. There's no charge. I'd love to have them on the air, or if they want to call in and just tell us what they do. You know, it's almost superficial to talk about, but one of the great parts of living in Rhode Island is the variety of cultures and food and entertainment and religion and that the South and West End of Providence afford us. That's what makes us special. That's what makes us different. I don't want to all of a sudden wake up in some homogenized community somewhere in the Midwest, which has got on every corner some national chain store. I want to go back to Broadway, and I want to go back to West Broadway, and I want to go back to Oneyville, and I want to have dinner. And you know what? And I want to have it at one of these amazing places, which for so many families represent the first step in achieving the American dream by simply taking their native cuisine and bringing it here. That's what makes Rhode Island special. It doesn't have a damn thing to do with any of the crap being promoted to us by an bloated, inefficient government who seeks really just to I don't know, blind us with cliches. It's all about the experiences that are offered by the very part of the community which we are literally killing.
Absolutely.
So if you've got folks like that, please send them my way. And because, you know, just like some of the fancier restaurants, and I salute their efforts as well. There's some wonderful employers, people who have built up great businesses and employ literally thousands, generations of Rhode Islanders in that sector. There are wonderful businesses on the South and West End, all right, and the North Side that give equal value to their communities. And maybe if we mixed it up a little bit, we could all have some fun and help each other dig ourselves out of this. So that invitation is open at any time. All right, my friend?
Okay, I appreciate it very much. Thank you very much. I'll pass the word on.
And
I thank you so much for having me on with all of yous. And, you know, I look forward to being able to come back again, especially if you extend the invitation so I can share some of the conversations and the findings that we may encounter with this new task force, this oversight task force that begins its first meeting tomorrow. So it would be great to have another conversation with regards to that and how how it has affected the state, and in particular, you know, the different communities, and how we are looking to move it forward from, you know, financially.
Let's consider it a date. All right.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. We're going to take our leave for this evening. As always, we are the Coalition. We are considerably, after this evening's efforts, louder and prouder. We are, as always, outrage porn free. We are civilly disobedient media. We broadcast live on the Worldwide Coalition Radio Network here in the bunker, high above the hills of Providence, the naked city, the city of 1,000 stories. We told a couple tonight, and I guess the best word I can use to reflect on them is poignant. Poignant yet troubling. Yet at the same time, the very notion that folks should come together and have a conversation like this illustrates the need for an independent media in this city to discuss what I will always refer to as the third rail issues. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course the mothership at coalitionradio.us. If you missed any and all of this will be available in moments after shutting down on the miracle of the Facebook, and we'll also be sharing the YouTube version of this across Rhode Island early tomorrow morning. Thanks for joining us tonight. Have a wonderful evening.
Have a good evening, everyone.
All right, buddies.
Good evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll talk again in the next day or so.
Okay, thank you.